Paradise has a price you're standing on heat. Not soil, heat. A slab of it, sun-signatured and shimmering, rising in steps toward a horizon of carved stone. The columns don't just hold up a roof, they hold up a story we've all learned to love. Enlightened empire, paid workers, a tolerant crown. Look closer. The story starts to sweat. On those stairs, on every panel of the Apadana, you can read a script in limestone smiles. Soft-bearded envoys carry gifts from everywhere the roads reach. Ivory, fabric, animals, jars of something sweet. The reliefs murmur, "We come willingly. We are many, we are one." It's Instagram, ancient style. And the caption? Fairness. Open the filing cabinet under the desert. Inside tablets, hard as bread left too long. Lines in cuneiform say the same thing your tour guide does. Rations paid, labor accounted for, wine counted in measures that still make sense to a thirsty mouth. The receipts glow like a halo. See? Not slaves. Paid men. A civilized empire keeps books, but the ledger leaves things out. Enter the word that makes the facade creak. Kurtak. Not slave in the Greek sense, no private owner with a name to curse. Not free either. No walking away, no packing up your tools because you feel like a different sky. The Kurtak are property of something larger than any man, the state's need. Imagine the memo. It doesn't ask. It informs. Your town is moving. Not your market, not your temple, you. The road goes one way. You'll work where the king's shadow falls, and his shadow is long. Bags? Bring what you can carry and what you won't miss. Friends? Same story. Home? That's a word you will now define as where the rations arrive. Yes, rations arrive. Grain. Wine. Silver by weight sometimes. The tablets will swear to it. And supervisors will swear at you. They will measure the day in tasks, not hours, because hours don't build. Stone builds. Timber builds. Baked brick builds when 1,000 hands lifted in the exact same rhythm. The elegant trick of the empire is vocabulary. Slave suggests a market and a price tag and a whip you can describe in a poem. Kurtak suggests a job, and a job suggests you agreed. But your feet say otherwise. Your feet didn't vote on this. Your feet didn't choose this staircase. They were assigned to it. A modern brain tries to sort this into a drawer. Is it good? Is it bad? The desert shrugs. Empires don't file themselves under our ethics. They file themselves under works. This system worked. The state fed, housed, and paid its dependents because the state needed bodies that wouldn't wander and skills that wouldn't scatter. You can call that humane if you like. You can also call it a cage with deliveries. There's a quiet brilliance in how the machine hides itself. Paperwork feels like fairness. The numbers look clean. Silver blinks back like a friendly eye. But the cleanest line on any tablet is the one that doesn't appear. Permission to leave. If you cannot leave, are you free? The empire answers with a smile carved in stone that never blinks. Walk the platform and listen. You'll hear accents the reliefs pretend not to hear. Lydia, Babylon, Egypt. Artisans fold into crews, and crews fold into a schedule, and the schedule folds into a season, and the season folds into a monument people will fly to see in 25 centuries, wearing sunglasses and wonder. The monument is made of choices, yes, but not yours. There's no villain to arrest here. The king didn't sell you. He simply placed you. The satrap didn't flog you. He simply counted you. The overseer didn't beat you. He measured you. Everything is softer than a whip and harder than a rock. The line between labor and bondage thins until it looks like a shadow on limestone. You can step over a shadow, but only if you're allowed to move. And the most unsettling part? No one inside this machine calls it cruelty. The same way we don't call a commute cruelty or a spreadsheet a weapon. This is just how the world is arranged when you decide to build something too large for one community's breath. The cost gets spread out. The road is the invoice. Your old life is the line item paid in full, so keep the postcard if you want. The towers photograph well. The steps are great for a wide shot. The air even smells like myth after noon. But don't forget to flip the card over. Read the small print. Constructed by hands that could not go home. The empire believes it kept its promise. Rations for labor. Measure for measure. And maybe that is a kind of fairness. The kind you can count is always easier to believe. Before we leave the platform, file one more note under words that matter. Normal. That's the strongest cement the king ever poured. Normal means the machine doesn't squeak when it turns. Normal means people move when spoken to. Normal means the tablets tell the truth and hide it at the same time. From here, the camera will pan off the steps and into a darker threshold. We have seen the hands that lift stone. Next, we meet the mouth that moves them. He is called the King of Kings. You do not look at him, not because your neck hurts, because your neck likes being attached. Paradise looks light. It isn't. Light is heavy when you carry it upstairs. Don't look up, not yet. In this room, eye contact is a kind of trespass, and trespass has a price. You don't meet the King of Kings. You move inside his weather. It's a climate shaped by breath held, sandals muffled, and the scent of resin burning sweetly from a dozen braziers, because even the air around him has to be filtered of chance. He is not seated on a throne so much as embedded in a diagram of power. Floors polished to mirrors, carpets thick as secrets, columns banded like spears. Every object points inward to the man whose pulse is supposed to match the rhythm of the universe. The word for him is a sentence, Shahansha. You can translate it if you like, King of Kings, but the original carries more voltage. It implies a stack of crowns with one skull beneath them, and the skull smiles only when the world is in alignment. You feel the alignment in your knees first. They touch stone. The ritual has a Greek name, proskynesis, but the Persians don't need a loanword to explain obedience. Body geometry does the explaining. Forehead to floor, arms extended, palms open, a full body yes. It is not humiliation to them. It is calibration. If he is order, then your posture should look like order. A bowed subject is tidy. Lift your head a fraction. Not to meet his eyes, never that, but to catch the choreography around him. A constellation of attendants orbits the center. Food tasters who turn their tongues into shields. Incense bearers who sculpt the very air with smoke. Fan carriers stirring a breeze that exists only at this altitude. Someone measures the temperature of the drink. Someone else weighs the ring seals before they touch royal skin. All of it says the same thing. The body of the king is where policy becomes flesh, so nothing random may touch it. The room is graded like a topographical map. The closer you stand to the nucleus, the higher your altitude of rank. A gesture grants a step inward. A flinch sends you 2 tiles back. Distances are laws. Touch is a verdict. A noble with old victories might be permitted within the echo of the king's voice. A satrap who recently misspent a grain levy may find himself listening from the courtyard, tallying the inches as if they were years. The lines are invisible until you cross them. Then they are a cliff. Here is how an empire breathes without shouting, the eyes and ears. That is not a nickname. It's a system. Imagine a web stitched over a continent and then anchored directly into this chamber, bypassing every governor who would normally filter the news. Reports come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A merchant who overheard a price, a porter who noticed 2 guards whispering, a clerk who counted the wrong sacks twice on purpose to see who corrected him. Some agents have titles. Many have aprons. None have signatures. Their notes arrive like weather, regular, changeable, and never ignorable. The effect is simple and devastating. Uncertainty becomes policy. If you don't know who is listening, you talk as though everyone is. If you don't know which ledger is being double-checked tonight, you make sure all of them can be. The fear isn't the spectacle in the square. That comes later, when theater is necessary. The fear is the quiet recalculation you perform before every sentence leaves your mouth. Self-censorship is cheaper than soldiers, and it scales. You might call this tyranny. They wouldn't. Words mean what your cosmology allows them to mean. In their framing, the king doesn't own the world. He maintains it. Think of him as the empire's firewall. Chaos is not just a political risk. It's metaphysical contamination. The lie, drudge, isn't merely false speech. It's the crackling entropy that unthreads reality. If the king's job is to keep the fabric from fraying, then of course he must know where the threads are thin. Surveillance in that story isn't a violation. It's laundry. Watch how decisions happen. You expect a room full of counsel, stamped seals, voices layered like a carpet, sometimes. But more often the choice begins before the meeting. In the skein of reports braided by men whose names you will never learn. The king hears not a debate, but a pattern. Grain short here, garrison tents there, a satrap unusually generous with temple donations the same week his roads fell into disrepair. He knows this not because a counselor told him, but because 5 unconnected mouths in 3 cities said compatible things. Coincidence rarely survives in a network designed to strangle it, and yet all this omniscience is fragile. That is why protocol inflates around him like armor. Note the redundancies. A cup is poured, tasted, and then poured again from a different jar. A document is read aloud from clay. then from a wax tablet, then recited from memory by a scribe who has been fasting since dawn to keep his mind sharp and his loyalties sharper. Redundancy is not waste. Redundancy is how you insult chance. Consider the angles of mercy. They exist, but not as you think. Mercy here is not softness. It's engineering. A satrap accused of siphoning taxes is not necessarily flayed by noon. First, the eyes and ears are cross-checked against each other like river levels in spring. If a false informant is discovered, he is pruned publicly. Not because the king hates gossip, but because he hates instruments that play out of tune. The point isn't punishment. The point is tuning the orchestra so no note contradicts the music. Now permit yourself the smallest glance, a cheekbone, a ring, the edge of a beard that has never known accidental ash. Even the king's stillness is choreography. He saves movement for when it matters. When the hand lifts, it's a verdict with fingers. A nod may feed a province. A tilt of the wrist could unmake a career that took 20 winters to build. The scarier truth? Sometimes he does nothing, and the room reorganizes itself around the nothing because the absence of a signal is a signal when everyone is tuned to the same frequency. People talk about charisma as though it were a smile that moved currency from other pockets into yours. This is different. This is metaphysical charisma, the belief that if he hiccuped at dawn, the sun would rise crooked. It isn't true. Of course it isn't, but you don't build empires by arguing probabilities with the devout. You build them by teaching everyone to prefer the known edge of the map to the rumors beyond it. He is the edge. He is the rumor tamer. What happens if you look him in the eye? The correct answer is you do not find out. A glance that climbs without permission is a breach in the dam. Water remembers the crack forever. The penalty is immediate not because his pride is fragile, but because the architecture is. Let one man think himself a horizontal line in a vertical world, and soon he will start walking in straight paths you didn't draw for him. The map cannot forgive that. You are allowed one kind of courage in here, the courage to deliver truth that threatens you. Odd, given the paranoia, but necessary. The eyes and ears depend on people who will speak against their own comfort, if the pattern demands it. So a steward steps forward and says the Queen Mother's nephew has been winning too many contracts for cedar. He does not accuse the Queen Mother, he measures the wood. He names prices, not people, he lives. Maybe you're tempted to pity the man at the center. Don't. Or do, briefly, then put the pity away like a cup you are not entitled to drink from. He sleeps behind checked doors, yes. He eats from guarded plates, yes. He cannot walk a garden path without making politics of the roses, yes. But he also experiences a power you will never touch, the ability to turn the empire's anxiety into obedience with a breath. The trade is not equal, but it is ancient. Burden for control, control for burden, until the scales feel like hands holding each other up. Leave the room the way you came in. Backward, careful, a tide going out. The corridor cools a degree, as though the brazier's ambition ends at the threshold. Your shoulders loosen without your permission. That is how you know you were inside a pressure system. Outside, the palace looks ordinary again. Stone, shadow, sky. The illusion returns quickly, because illusions like their jobs. Remember two things as the sun slides along the columns. First, fear can be a kind of love in a world where chaos is the enemy. Second, systems built to hear everything eventually hear themselves. The whisper that leaves your mouth today may come back tomorrow wearing a different cloak and a seal you didn't recognize the first time. The king will hear it. He always does. That's the design. Lift your eyes now. Not at him, he's behind walls again, but at the skyline he commands. The platforms don't look lighter, but they look explained. Order has a voice. You just listen to it without interrupting. Next, you will hear what happens when that voice decides memory needs teeth. The room you left polices the heart. The square outside polices the nerves. Justice will be rendered not in ink, but in images that stain the mind. The bench is ready. The audience is easy to find. They live here. They are you. A judge sits on justice, then justice sits on the judge. That is the lesson carved into rumor and retold with the calm of a recipe. The story begins the way most corruption begins. Small, private, discreet. A bribe arrives as hospitality, not a bag. The law bends a finger's width. The city doesn't fall. No thunder. Only arithmetic, one cheat plus one man plus one bench. Then the king hears because the king always hears. And what follows is not a trial so much as a staging. The empire does not correct error in private. It choreographs memory. The arrest is swift. No door-kicking drama, no parade of soldiers. A hand on a shoulder in a corridor that smells faintly of wax and dust. The judge understands in the way men understand when the air changes before a storm. He is escorted, catalogued, stripped, first of rings, then of titles, then of the fiction that the bench was anything but borrowed authority. Execution is not the headline. The headline is what comes after, the skin. Flayed, intact, treated, stretched, a human hide turned into upholstery. The bench is dressed for work. Now the son, he is seated where his father sat, on what his father became, and the allegory writes itself even if no one says it aloud. Every verdict the son pronounces rubs a nerve raw. The message is not subtle because subtlety is too easy to forget. This is policy by texture. To govern an empire, you must craft stories that hurt to touch. Punishments in this world have a cruel elegance. They are not random. They are rhymed. A liar loses the instrument of the lie. A thief loses the instrument of theft. It is poetic justice with the poetry sharpened to a point. Fingers go, tongues go, noses go, and it isn't gore for gore's sake. It is pedagogy by anatomy. The public understands what is taken because the public understands what was used to harm the order. Then there is a punishment that outgrows language. We call it scaphism because Greek syllables travel well, but the Persians didn't need the word to understand the terror. Two boats or a hollowed log, a body trapped between them, fed and smeared so that life continues while living becomes impossible.
The sun does the rest.
So do insects and water and time that refuses to hurry. You do not need to watch to be punished by it. Hearing about it is enough. Imagination serves as auxiliary executioner. Whether every detail is history or legend is almost beside the point. The point is how legend governs. The rumor of the boats walks faster than any soldier, arriving in villages that will never see a satrap's court, whispering to men who will never meet a judge. This is the part where modern minds reach for words like barbaric. The empire would answer with a chart. The chart is labeled deterrence efficiency. It maps spectacle against compliance. The spectacle is expensive, yes, in materials, in time, in whatever a human being is before politics takes it apart. But the return is the only currency that matters to a state with too many miles of road and not enough eyes to watch them. Obedience that self-renews. Once a story like the bench circulates, it starts working nights. Parents tell it to sons the way you teach a child not to touch fire. The law becomes a bedtime story with claws. Is there no mercy in this theater? There is, but mercy here looks like competence. A judge suspected is not skinned on gossip. The eyes and ears cross-pollinate. Accounts are reconciled twice. Informants are tested with decoys, like a fisherman testing a knot before trusting a storm. A false report once proved meets its own calibrated end. The message is twofold. The king punishes wrongdoing, and the king punishes bad data. The first protects order. The second protects the instrument that protects order. If you metastasize rumor, you will be treated as disease. Notice how the stage is built. Public squares, elevated platforms, timing that packs crowds. Timing is policy. Executions clash with market days on purpose. News from the bench is read in front of textile sellers because textile sellers talk, and talking is the bloodstream of empire. The language of the decree is minimal: name, offense, consequence, invocation of cosmic order. No sermons. The brevity is deliberate. If the script is short, people memorize it. If they memorize it, they transmit it intact. Complex moral argument is for priests and knights that last too long. Governance likes monosyllables. Lie, tongue. Steal, hand. Betray, boat, remember. And memory is not left untended. Officials repaint scenes not with pigment but with repetition. The sun judge sits again tomorrow and again next week, and each sitting sands the edge of disbelief until even the most skeptical mouth admits, this happened. The bench becomes a landmark. Tour a visiting dignitary through the treasury, the armory, the gardens, and the bench. Let him carry the image home. He will call it monstrous. He will also report that corruption here has a natural predator, but violence alone is a clumsy brush. The state prefers a thinner line when it can. Fines hurt wealth. Demotions hurt pride. Reassignment hurts networks. A clerk who padded shipments goes to a remote depot where padding means cold and loneliness, not profit. He is not executed. He is made unimportant. In a world addicted to proximity, the geometry of power we just walked through, distance is its own jail. Sometimes that works better than a blade in the square. Sometimes it does not. The art is in choosing what will be remembered longest by those who have not yet erred. Why such theater at all? Because law on paper persuades only the literate, and even they prefer pictures. The empire deals in images. The reliefs on the stair show compliance smiling. The punishments show disobedience screaming. Together they bracket the acceptable. Between them, daily life flows like water inside a carved channel. Step outside the channel and you will feel what water feels when hammered with heat. You will vanish in steam. There is a philosophical core beneath the gore, and it is not shy. The cosmos in this telling fractures along a bright seam. Truth versus the lie, order versus drift. A bribe is not a private sin. It is a cosmological leak. Plug leaks brutally, and the ship holds. Plug them gently, and the hull learns softness. The hull must not learn softness. Too many lives live inside it. Watch the crowd watching punishment. The lesson is collective, but the reactions are personal. A shopkeeper counts a day's coins twice and makes sure his hand doesn't favor his own pocket. A junior scribe imagines the taste of words if his tongue were gone, and suddenly accuracy becomes erotic. A petty satrapling, dangerous age, dangerous arrogance, rehearses the limits of swagger in the mirror that night. The theater installs a supervisor inside each skull. That is cheaper than minting more guards. Of course, a machine this sharp can cut the hand that oils it. Sometimes innocence bleeds. Sometimes malice wears the mask of order. A rival whispers persuasively, a faction needs a cautionary casualty, and the square eats a man the network should have protected. The Empire knows this. The Empire swallows hard and labels it collateral ritual. The next day, the machine continues. In their math, the aggregate holds more stability than injustice, more obedience than resentment, more roads safe than caravans robbed. It is a cold equation, but it predicts fewer funerals where officials are the corpses. What about repentance? There is room for it, but repentance here is an engineering problem, not a feeling. Make restitution. You may keep a hand. Confess first. Your tongue speaks once more before silence. Serve as an example from the lower rungs. The upper rungs will remember your usefulness. The calculus is not moral in the soft way, tears and absolution, but moral in the structural way. Can the system harvest a fault and reroute it into strength? And so the judge's bench remains, not because furniture lasts, but because symbols do. The sun ages. He presides. Perhaps he grows fair because he sits on pain. Perhaps he grows cruel because he thinks cruelty is how wood is polished. The Empire doesn't measure his heart. It measures the metrics. Bribes down, cases resolved, whispers quieted, eyes meeting the floor at the correct angle in the correct rooms. By those numbers, the bench succeeds. When the square empties and the dust resettles, the crowd drifts back toward the ordinary. Market, water, arguments over price and spice. The spectacle fades to the edge of the day, but it does not leave. Someone mentions a friend thinking about bending the rule just this once. The friend decides not to. A story just saved the treasury a coin and the Empire a headache. Theater paid for itself. Now turn from the square and follow the corridor that refuses men with knives but welcomes men with keys. We are going to the household where politics sleeps and wakes. There, love is policy and birth is treaty. And the quietest wars in the Empire are fought with lullabies and doors that lock from both sides. Open your mind, not your mouth. Inside rank wears perfume. And the most dangerous rival may be the one who calls the king brother. Step through the gates and leave behind the roar of the square. Here the air is quieter, perfumed, deliberate. This isn't simply a home. It is a second empire nested inside the first, an empire of silk, rivalries, and bloodlines. The word harem in our ears suggests pillows and perfume, but for Persia it meant strategy as sharp as any sword. At the summit of this hidden world stands the Queen Mother. She is not decoration. She is not memory. She is experience crystallized into influence. Men bow to her as they bow to generals, because she has survived what they have not, decades of intrigue. Her allies are spread through the court like veins through marble. A whisper from her chamber can tilt the future. Below her is the principal wife, the Shakbanu, queen in title and duty. She is often a sister or niece of the king, welded to him by blood, not just ceremony. Her mission is blunt, bear the air. But even blunt missions have sharp edges. Every meal, every birth, every rumor is weighed against her ability to deliver stability through a child. Further down the ladder are the secondary wives, daughters of kings, sisters of satraps, tokens of loyalty shaped into marriages. Each is a treaty written in flesh. Each carries her homeland in her eyes, her accent, her silences. Their presence in the household is diplomacy in chains, proof that the empire has woven itself into their families so tightly they cannot unravel without breaking. And then the concubines, hundreds, sometimes thousands. They are chosen for beauty, for skill, for song, for conversation. But beauty here is not leisure. Beauty is currency. A concubine can rise, a concubine can fall, and her ascent or descent can drag whole factions with her. Behind the curtains, alliances bloom and betrayals are seeded. What looks like a garden of desire is actually a battlefield where the future of dynasties is contested. Every woman here knows the stakes. Her survival is tied to her sons. Her influence, her status, even her right to breathe within these walls depends on whether her child is seen as a legitimate contender. The harem is not leisure. It is an incubator of succession wars. Rivalries seethe quietly but never sleep. A lullaby is a campaign speech. A smile at a banquet can tilt allegiance. The men who guard this sanctum are the eunuchs, but their chapter deserves its own telling. For now, understand that no man enters here without being altered forever, and no man leaves without having seen enough secrets to shape the empire itself. They are the locks and the keys at once. Marriage here is not romance. It is scaffolding for empire. Every union stacks another layer onto the architecture of control. And yet, within the polished walls, affection does appear, whispered, cautious, dangerous. But affection is always weighed against politics, and often it loses. To us, the harem is an exotic word. To them, it was the pivot on which the empire's stability turned. If the king's justice kept provinces obedient, the harem kept the throne itself secure or tore it apart. And just when you think this is strange enough, the next rule overturns the table completely. Because here, the holiest marriage is the one that would make our world recoil. A brother to a sister, a son to his mother. Not scandal, not sin, but the purest form of worship. The circle tightens. The bloodline loops back on itself. The empire calls it sacred. We call it something else. But step carefully, because in their eyes, what we call corruption was the highest act of devotion. What we call the ultimate taboo, the Persians called the holiest act. In their world, blood was not just family, it was a weapon. A vessel of purity in a cosmos locked between light and darkness. And the most sacred way to guard that purity was to keep it sealed within itself. The word was swedoda, next of kin marriage. To us, it sounds like sin. To them, it was salvation. A father and daughter, a mother and son, a brother and sister, unions that to modern ears sound monstrous, were praised in Zoroastrian texts as the most virtuous of all. This was not rumor, not scandal whispered behind doors. It was doctrine, taught as duty, preached as piety. The logic, once you step into their frame, is brutally clear. The world is divided. Truth on one side, the lie, Druge on the other. Noble families were seen as vessels of truth, their blood carrying divine order. To mix that blood with outsiders, even other nobles, was to dilute it, weaken it, risk corruption. The strongest defense against chaos was to fold purity back upon itself. A brother and sister joining wasn't incest. It was reinforcement, an act of cosmic maintenance. King set the example. Cambyses married his own sister. Artaxerxes did the same. These weren't hidden arrangements. They were proclamations of holiness. By displaying what others might call corruption, the kings proved they were the guardians of purity, willing to obey the highest, hardest command of their god. To refuse would have been weakness, even impiety. Imagine the psychology this breeds. A son marrying his mother isn't a tragedy. It's celebrated as a public act of devotion. A sister becoming a queen isn't whispered about in shame. It's declared as proof that the family is too sacred to be shared. Bloodline becomes altar, and the union itself is sacrifice offered to order. For commoners, such arrangements were rarer, complicated, impractical, often impossible. But the ideal mattered as much as the practice. Families were taught that the purest form of love was the one that never strayed outside their own blood. Even if they couldn't fulfill it, they aspired to it, honored it, believed it. That aspiration reinforced the idea that kin marriage was not only allowed but divine. The result is a culture where our categories, family, love, duty, sin, don't hold. Where the thing we call perverse was the highest virtue. Where morality itself is inverted, because their battlefield was cosmic, not social. To protect creation against evil, they believed you had to do what seemed unthinkable to outsiders. And in that inversion lies the shock. It reminds us that morality is not fixed. What feels universal to us was not universal to them. Our deepest taboos were their holiest rights. Their kings stood before the empire, arm in arm with sisters, mothers, daughters, and said, "This is purity. This is order. This is how the world is saved." But such unions needed guardians, men who could move freely in this world of sacred women, who could be trusted never to create rival bloodlines of their own. Men reshaped into something else, neither husband nor father. To understand them is to step even further into the strangeness of Persia. The doors open and the eunuchs enter. They were called eunuchs, but in Persia that word meant something far larger, far sharper than the image of soft-handed servants lingering in the background. Here, they were the ultimate insiders, the ones who held the keys to the empire's most forbidden spaces, the ones who could shape succession, topple kings, and whisper futures into being. The path to becoming one was brutal. Most were boys, prisoners of war or purchased in markets, chosen young enough to be reshaped before loyalty could root anywhere else. The operation itself was agony, castration without mercy, without medicine, often without survival. Many died. Those who lived carried scars deeper than their skin. Their childhoods ended with a blade, and what emerged was a new kind of man, or perhaps something no longer counted in ordinary categories at all. Why create such a class? Because the empire needed trust it could not find anywhere else. A nobleman with sons could be tempted to carve out a dynasty. A general with ambition could turn his loyalty into rebellion. But a eunuch? He could never father children, never seed a rival bloodline. His entire existence, his comfort, his wealth, his survival, all of it flowed from the king alone. Loyalty wasn't just expected, it was engineered. But dependence is power in disguise. Inside the royal household, eunuchs were the gatekeepers. They managed the harem, controlling which woman was seen, which message was carried, which son was acknowledged. They controlled money, lands, estates, and workshops that funneled wealth through their hands. They controlled time, who saw the king and when, who waited in the courtyard until their hope curdled. Access was everything, and the eunuchs owned it. The greatest of them became kingmakers. Take Bagoas, the infamous eunuch of Artaxerxes III. He poisoned kings. He installed others. For a time, he ruled the empire through pliable figureheads, his mutilation transformed into leverage. He had no sons, no dynasty, but he didn't need one. He wielded succession itself as his weapon. They were feared, but they were indispensable. In a household swirling with rival queens, scheming concubines, and sons with daggers in their eyes, eunuchs were the only men allowed to move freely. Their very presence was paradox, both broken and empowered, mutilated and mighty. They were guardians, administrators, spies, and confidants, trusted with secrets so dangerous that even generals dared not touch them. It created a strange, almost third gender, not men in the conventional sense, not women, but something else, something the empire built to solve its own problems. Eunuchs lived in a world of women but commanded authority beyond many men. They carried the king's whisper. They could make or unmake the futures of princes. This wasn't charity, it was design. A system that took pain and turned it into power, that stripped boys of lineage and remade them into instruments sharper than any sword. In their silence and their secrets, the empire found the glue that held the most dangerous household in the world together. But the palace was not the only stage where Persia displayed its strangeness. Step outside the perfumed halls, and you find another theater, one filled with music, meat, and wine. A banquet that could last all night, where decisions about war and peace were made under the heavy haze of intoxication. If justice was theater, then politics was a feast. The hall breathes like a beast. Braziers low, music coiled in the corners, platters arriving in waves that feel less like courses than campaigns. Power here is not a speech. It is a table. Carpets hush the footfalls. Cups clink like quiet bells. No one rushes the first pour. That belongs to the king, and the king does not sip. He signals. A nod, and the wine moves, and the evening begins to unbutton its restraint. Feast in Persia is never just appetite. It is proof of state, a demonstration that the empire can summon abundance as easily as an army. Fruit piles like small hills. Meat glitters with fat and spice. The air smells of smoke and sweetness and something more ceremonial. Resin kissed by flame, a reminder that even pleasure is supervised. Dishes parade past you in an order that reads like a proclamation. The land is generous, the roads are safe. The kitchens have hierarchies as strict as any garrison. This is prosperity as policy, meant to be eaten and remembered. The wine arrives with a gravity that water never has. It is hospitality, but also an instrument. The Persians believed what their enemies could not forgive them for believing, that wine loosens truth from the knots of caution. So the first conversations are polite, precise, as though the words have been combed. Then the edges soften. A senator of another empire might fear the slip. A Persian hosts it. He expects candor to blossom under the influence like a night-blooming flower, the kind you'll miss if you insist on daylight for every inspection. Drunken courage and sober caution are both part of the instrument panel. The state refuses to fly with only one dial. Topics grow teeth. Border tensions, satrapal budgets, the slow bleed of a distant garrison's morale. Things too raw for daylight politeness gain a sudden, blunt clarity. The shy man argues like a blade. The proud man listens like a well. Someone proposes what no one would have dared at noon. Laughter meets it first, then argument, real argument, the kind that cares more for outcome than for posture. Wine strips performance from the tongue, and what remains is appetite, sometimes for food, sometimes for truth. Mock this if you want. They called it prudence. If a plan cannot survive intoxication, perhaps it was too delicate to carry the weight of empire. But if a plan only emerges under intoxication, perhaps it was too timid to surface sober. So they designed a loop. Tonight, decide with your guard down. Tomorrow, measure with your guard up. 2 verdicts, 2 states of mind. Only what passes both gates becomes law. The ritual has rules because even chaos has tasks in this empire. A scribe sits near enough to catch the meaning, but far enough to miss the slur, trained to extract decisions from the foam of argument. He writes not the jests, but the joints, the places where the talk bends into resolve. The cups are kept honest by tasters who drink before princes do. The vessels are counted, the jug mouths inspected with a candle's hard eye. It is a strange mix, loosened minds in a tightened process. The king presides not to drown his will in wine, but to watch which ideas stay afloat when inhibition sinks. Morning is not a hangover here. It is a courtroom. Curtains open. Sun declares jurisdiction. Water clears platforms that wine built. The same men reconvene, and the table is set with ink instead of meat. What seemed bold last night must seem wise today. What seemed cowardly last night must look careful now. The scribe reads, "The room winces at its own bravery and vanity, and sometimes brilliance. If a decision survives both states, it becomes a law with calluses toughened by 2 weathers. If it fails the second pass, it dies without ceremony, and no one calls this backpedaling. They call it filtration. And then there is a drink reserved for altars, not tables. Haoma, the word itself tastes like an incantation. A plant pressed into liquid, a liquid pressed into vision. Priests prepare it with a choreography that is older than politics. Pestle, mortar, strainers clean as oath, chants that cut a road through air for whatever must travel. They do not drink to forget. They drink to remember the pattern beneath patterns, the architecture that stands when the world looks like it's falling. Ecstasy here is not an escape. It is reconnaissance. What happens to a mind in that sacrament is described with a geometry of light. Veils thin, meanings step closer. The priest does not see the future the way a gambler does. He sees the structure the way a carpenter does. The joints, the grain, the place where pressure will either hold or split the beam. Counsel sent from that place is not phrased as God told me, but as this alignment keeps the house up. The state listens, because it believes not only in armies and accounting, but also in properly tuned attention, the kind that hears what sober minds are too loud to catch. Skeptics from other cultures called it delirium, then promptly ask their own oracles questions at dawn. Hypocrisy travels well. What matters is that Persia made room for multiple kinds of knowing. Wine for candor. Wakefulness for caution. Thioma for vision. If reality is layered, wisdom must be too. Reduce statecraft to 1 layer and you'll mistake your blind spots for principles. But there are guards on the gates of vision. Not every priest can pour, not every mood can drink. The rite obeys sanitation as much as sanctity. Vessels are purified as though the god were picky about dust. Words are spoken in a grammar stricter than law, because sloppy speech attracts sloppy spirits. Even rapture is audited. The king does not read the priest's eyes. He reads the outcomes. Were the wells protected? Did the pestilence break when the ritual said it would? Did the crop cycle answer the hymn with grain? If not, the state reduces the priest's voice to poetry and looks for better listeners. Return to the banquet and you'll see understudies of the altar. Cups circle. Questions do too. The king tests his circle by proposing what he does not prefer. Who agrees because their salary depends on it? Who opposes with respect and reasons? Wine emboldens truth-tellers and exposes courtiers whose only courage is in anticipating the king's opinions. Night becomes a sieve for character. Risk exists, and they admit it. Drink too deeply and you mistake audacity for insight. Love the sacrament more than the god and you trade guidance for theater. That is why redundancy is everywhere. Tasters, scribes, next-day councils, records that can be read by men who dislike you. These people believe in humans as instruments, fallible, tunable, likely to drift. The loop is the tuning. Watch a decision that survives both rooms. Last night, Move a winter granary 2 days closer to the mountain villages. The passes will close early. Famine will make rebels of shepherds. It sounded like worry with wine in it. Today, maps spread, wind patterns recited. A courier arrives with a scrap from a far valley where snow has already flirted with the ridge. The decision passes. Not because it was beautiful, because it held under two kinds of pressure. This double testing builds a political culture that can flex without snapping. Men disagree at night and salute in daylight because the ritual permitted their dissent where it belongs and demanded their alignment where it is required. It is not freedom as we preach it, but it is a safety valve engineered by people who learned that sealed systems explode. Notice the janitors of memory hovering at the edge. Archivists who will turn tonight's storm into tomorrow's precedent. Kitchen accountants tallying how much excess equals wealth display versus waste. Cupbearers whose names survive in records because proximity is history. A state is not only soldiers and laws, it is also the logistics of feeling. The Persians organized feelings, courage, caution, awe, and then scheduled them. Step outside. Night air brushes wine-swept cheeks. The stars over the palace are bright the way cold makes iron bright. Somewhere, a priest rinses the last trace of hyoma from a bowl as though leaving any drop would invite the wrong visitor. Somewhere else, a scribe closes a tablet, impressed lines drying into tomorrow's memory. And the king? He is neither drunk nor sober. He is both remembered and anticipated. A man whose power is not to decide alone, but to force decisions to survive more than one version of him. The method explains the empire more than the armies do. They distrusted single states of mind the way they distrusted single witnesses. That distrust became custom. Custom became institution. Institution became legend. The people who decided drunk and confirmed sober, who listened to priests without bowing to them, who believed that truth to be useful, must be made to travel through fire and water before it is allowed to touch the grain. Tomorrow another table will be set. Another argument will reveal who is brave only with a cup and who is careful only with a quill. The empire will keep both men because it has room for both states. And if you still think this is madness, ask yourself how many of your own decisions were made in rooms that allowed for only one kind of you. The first rule of death here is that the living must not be harmed by it. Not in their lungs, not in their water, not in the quiet geometry of their souls. When breath stops, the body becomes a problem, urgent, invisible, and spiritual. They have a name for what moves in when life moves out. The corpse demon, a fly-shaped hunger that colonizes flesh the instant it cools. Pollution isn't a metaphor. It's a physics of sanctity. Touch the wrong thing the wrong way, and impurity breeds like rot in grain. So the household doesn't cry first. It secures first. Doors open, but not for mourners. For a dog with two eyes painted by nature above its eyes, a four-eyed guardian whose stare is a liturgy, Sagdid. The dog stares 3 times, or 6, or 9, depending on who was loved and how urgently the world needs to be cleaned of what just began. No one argues with a dog's arithmetic. The gaze pushes the demon back, buys moments of breathable air in the soul's most dangerous hour. The family stands aside. They do not touch. Love waits its turn behind ritual. Then the corpse bearers arrive. People no one envies, people everyone needs. They live at the edge of the map because the work they do keeps the center from failing. They handle what others cannot without becoming unclean for seasons. Gloves cannot help. Piety must. Their hands are trained more carefully than most men's minds. They lift, swaddle, remove. Not to a grave. Not to a pyre. Earth is holy, and so is fire, and a human body, now haunted, must not insult either. They carry the dead out beyond gardens and wells, beyond walls to unpromised ground, sun-polished and bird-haunted. There stands a platform of stone or a barren field laid aside for this one purpose, to give the beasts their sacrament. You might call it exposure. They call it assurance. Flesh is unclean. Bone is not. So they give the unclean to the cleanest agents of separation they know, sun and sky and sharp-beaked ministers with white wings. It is not cruelty. It is hygiene of the sacred. Here, a body is a lesson in layers. First, the world takes what must not be kept. Days pass. The birds do their meticulous work, artisans of subtraction, ignoring the prayers of the stomach in favor of a larger order. Dogs come too, and no one drives them away. The same creature that guarded the threshold now cleans it. The sun writes its hot scripture across the remainder. Wind finishes sentences, the birds begin. There is no haste. The living are not impatient with necessity. When the bones are clean, the bearers return. The harsh part is over. The holy part begins. They lift what is finally pure, and take it not to earth, not to flame, but to a place made for memory without pollution. A stone box, an ossuary, a niche in a wall that holds bones like a shelf holds law. The family can come here and be near without risking the sanctity of the elements. Mourning becomes possible because danger has been managed. Love has room to be love again, but the sky is not always hungry. Winter arrives wearing snow. Rain turns wings into wet laundry. Vultures go elsewhere to make a living from other people's dead. Now the clock starts to roar. Decomposition is a kind of speech the world understands as insult. The rules provide a tool for days like this: wax. Cloak the body in a thick skin of it, seal every seam, every mouth, every mystery. The wax doesn't pretend the corpse is not a corpse. It builds a wall between profanity and earth. The burial that follows is not a betrayal of doctrine, but an obedience to its first command: do not pollute. Wax stiffens the promise. Special cases exist, and they are strict enough to make the strict look lenient. For the magi, priests who pronounce the world clean or unclean with their mouths, the rules bite harder. Their bodies, once emptied of breath, must be proofed by the same mouths of dog or wing that proof every other impurity, but more immediately, more absolutely. The purity police do not enjoy immunity from their own laws. If anything, the law sharpens on their ribs first. Holiness here is not an exemption. It is an increased exposure. Grief learns these rules young. Children can recite them the way they recite seed time and harvest. They know why you don't wash hands in the river where your town drinks. They know why you shouldn't build ovens where smoke might carry uncleanness back into doorways. They know that a tear can be touched to bone but not to flesh. They learn to control compassion so that compassion doesn't accidentally rot the world. You might feel a revolt rising at the thought of birds where we would place pallbearers, of dogs where we would place hymns. But look again at the logic. In a religion where water is a god's mirror, you do not crack it with decay. In a religion where fire is a god's breath, you do not feed it what makes air wicked. In a religion where earth is a mother and a guest room at once, you do not track filth across its clean floors. So death is routed away from these altars. The bones become the only part allowed back to the party, and there is this harder truth. The living must go on living. Not in a small way, in a way that keeps roads safe and granaries whole and children unafraid to drink. So they export the hazard to the only elements robust enough to digest it without harm: sun, scavenger, time. It is a system with teeth and tenderness both. The tenderness is for the world. The teeth are for whatever crawls out of order. A skeptic notes the indignity. A believer notes the salvation. The empire notes the cleanliness. All three are right by their own lighting. What no one denies is the consistency. The same culture that will not piss in a river will not put a corpse in it either. The same culture that will flay a judge to keep truth from dissolving will also keep an entire valley's water from becoming a slow poison for the poor. You can call it contradiction. They call it one grammar for many sentences. There are gestures of gentleness inside the severity. The dog that stares is fed well. The bearers are paid, purified, thanked at a distance that does not undo the thanks. Families are allowed to touch memory even if they cannot touch flesh. Names are spoken in rooms where air is safe. The dead are not abandoned. They are processed by a universe that insists on cleanliness as a condition of beauty. And if someone dies far from platforms and wax, in a mountain pass where snow owns all, the rules flex without breaking. A temporary shelter is formed, a boundary scratched around the body, prayers repeated like ropes throwing loops around panic. When weather loosens, the bearers come. The delay is recorded, the remedy applied, the world forgiven because the intention was defense, not neglect. Law here is not a machine snapping at fingers. It is a spine that bends to keep walking. What this tells you about Persia is the same thing every other room has told you. That order is both compassion and cruelty by turns. And the turning is decided by what must be protected most. Here, that is water, fire, and earth. Because without them, no garden grows, no soldier marches, no child lives to learn what words mean. Death is honored by not allowing it to rot the living. It is love expressed as sanitation. When the rites are finished, the house can breathe again. A basin is filled and emptied in the right direction. A threshold is brushed with a palm dipped in clean ash. The dog is petted and told he is good, which he already knew, but which humans need to say to forgive themselves for needing him. The bones rest. The family eats. The world resets its delicate balances, ready to be offended again by the next inevitable departure, and ready, also, to defend itself without becoming crueler than it must. Walk back toward town and count the clean wells. Count the children laughing as they chase a dog that once stared down a demon. Count the smoke that rises from hearths that burn what should burn and never what should not. The Empire's harshness leaves this soft residue everywhere, working water, sane fire, unpoisoned ground. You can dislike the theater of their solutions. You cannot deny the clarity of their aim. And now, among the breathing, the same lines hold, circles drawn to keep purity intact, distances measured not by tape, but by danger. Sit where you are permitted. Eat with those you are allowed. Approach only as close as rank, ritual, and reality will let you. You have seen how they manage the dead. Watch now how they manage the living, and how a misstep in distance can become a verdict, how a meal can be a map, how a garden can be a sermon about control that somehow smells like mercy.
Begin with a table.
Not the feast, the ordinary table where people tear bread and beliefs in the same hour. Here, eating is not simply fuel, it is a declaration. To share a dish is to admit equality, and equality is rationed as strictly as grain in a famine year. A priest does not eat with a soldier. A noble does not sit beside a clerk. A satrap's son does not lower himself into the laughter of artisans, and an artisan knows better than to mistake kindness for permission. The meal draws borders more clearly than any map. You eat only with those whose breath the law says may mingle with yours. Walk a street and watch the separations. Doorways tell you who belongs where. Courtyards grade status by shade and silence. Invitations are calibrated like weights on a balance. Accept the wrong one and you find your name lighter tomorrow. A boy learns early that the quickest way to die socially is to eat with enthusiasm in the wrong room. So he learns to be hungry among strangers and satisfied among equals. He learns that appetite is not a right. It is a rank. Carry this lesson to the palace and you will understand the geometry of danger. The king's world is organized in circles of permission. Each ring is a sentence about you. What you can say, where you may stand, whether your life can be defended if it goes wrong. The inner ring is heat. The next ring is hope. The ring after that is rumor. The outermost ring is dust, petitioners who never get inside, who learn to talk to doors as if doors were gods. Step one tile too near, and you have not merely misjudged etiquette. You have declared war on the arrangement of the world. Punishment is instantaneous because architecture must not wobble. You hear people praise Persian women as powerful, and it is not a lie. A name like Erdabama travels down the years, wearing ledgers like jewelry. She commands workers, signs rations, moves with her own caravan and stamps. Wealth obeys her signature. Men follow her schedule. In this empire, a woman can buy land and manage it so efficiently that lesser men fear her numbers. She can arbitrate disputes and have the disputers thank her publicly, because the alternative is foolishness. A queen mother can steer the court with a glance. A principal wife can make a prince into an heir with a smile that everyone must pretend is only a smile. But every power here comes with a hinge that opens only one way. It is loaned from above. It can be repossessed without notice. The same hand that endowed an estate can unwrite it with a ring pressed into wax. Even royal women live in a house whose keys are not theirs, and when vengeance moves through those keys, it does not apologize. A king swears a birthday oath to grant a wish. A queen uses the oath to injure someone law will not let her touch directly. A mother of a concubine returns home unrecognizable, not because she sinned, but because policy needed a face to wear its warning. The message is surgical and monstrous at once. Your safety is a function of favor, not of fairness. A paradox tightens around them. The more powerful a woman becomes, the sharper the knives that believe they are owed her. Her caravans travel with guards who protect her ledgers from theft and her reputation from gossip, and the two are equally threatening. A misstep in speech, an uncalculated kindness to the wrong faction's nephew, a misinterpreted look at a banquet, these can erase decades of competence in a single afternoon. She is seen because she succeeds. She is targeted because she is seen. On good days, the balance holds. On bad days, history writes her in a past tense edged with pity. Now watch the boys, the ones being trained to inherit not merely property but posture. Their curriculum is a trident, horse, bow, truth. The horse teaches balance that a life of rooms will try to destroy. Bareback bruises are arguments the body wins against fear. The bow teaches power that only answers to practice. Hands bleed, backs harden, and pride learns to shut up until it hits the target 3 times in a wind that wishes you dead. The truth. This is the sharpest lesson and the most dangerous because the word doesn't mean what you want it to. Truth is not opinion in daylight. It is alignment with order. To speak truth is to speak in such a way that the empire can walk forward upon your sentence without stumbling. Lying, then, is not merely fact-bent. It is treason against the geometry that keeps the roof up. Their childhood is a crucible that teaches pity as a leak. They are taken to see the punishments not for gore but for grammar. A flayed bench instructs better than a sermon. An empty wrist clarifies theft better than 100 proverbs. They learn the price of drift the way city children learn traffic, by watching what happens to those who step without looking. If a boy cries, he learns to do it at the right distance from witnesses. If he laughs, he learns to test whether the laughter harms the chain of command. The education is not how to be good. It is how to be useful to the architecture. And yet, next to this steel, you find odd tendernesses laid out like gifts and chores. Water is an altar, so do not spit in it. Fire is sacred, so do not insult it with what was once breathing. Earth hosts your steps, so do not make it swallow what will make it sick. A man who would order an execution in the morning will scold his son at dusk for dipping dirty hands in a stream. The same court that can turn a bribe into upholstery will pause a procession so a thirsty dog can drink from a bowl filled by a prince. The dog is not a mascot. He is a moral. Care for him, and something in the world will care for you when you cross a bridge made of judgment after death. Kindness here is not softness. It is currency in a bank you cannot visit while breathing. Go into a garden, and you will understand everything else. The word that becomes ours for paradise begins here, inside a wall where chaos is invited to behave. Water runs in straight channels that refuse to be surprised by drought. Trees from all provinces stand in rows like troops who have learned to be shade. Paths meet at angles that allow both wandering and certainty. It is not wilderness tamed. It is the empire's self-portrait in leaves and light. The king walks here not to forget power, but to remember what power is for. To make a world where a child can nap under a quince tree without learning the names of spears too early. From the garden, return to the city. The logic follows you. Markets hum inside drawn lines. Wells glitter because someone forbade grief from polluting them with the dead. Even cruelty seems to be in the service of something other than itself. A machine that prefers scars on individuals to rot in the water that feeds everyone. You do not have to admire it to understand it. You only have to admit that it works on its own terms, which is perhaps the most unsettling admission a foreigner can make. Now picture the skyline again. Stone that remembers hands that could not go home. Halls where the air is strained through rituals of distance. Squares where justice brands the mind. Chambers where love is calculus. Banquets that test courage twice. Altars where vision drinks a plan and returns with diagrams. Platforms where birds finish the work the living must not do. The empire is coherent the way a hard poem is coherent, every line obeying a grammar you did not know you knew until it finished with you. Stand there, breathing the same heat you began with, and ask the last question quietly. What part of your own world looks like mercy from inside and cruelty from out? What table have you mistaken for friendship when it was rank? What distance have you called respect when it was fear dressed in embroidery? What garden hides a ledger? Paradise here is beautiful. Paradise here is expensive. The receipt is everywhere if you touch the stone long enough to feel the numbers carved under the polish.